Crocodile Hunter. Steve Irwin built a career out of interacting with dangerous animals until his life was cut tragically short. Here's a look at events surrounding Irwin's death and what else was going on in the world that day. The only animal Steve Irwin was afraid of was the parrot, thanks to a few bird bites. But the animal that actually took his life had a far more docile reputation. Stingrays are usually quite harmless, but on September 4, 2006, a stingray caused Irwin's death at the age of 44.
There was always a chance that we could have lost him, but to me, he always seemed indestructible.
The zoologist was filming Ocean's Deadliest, a documentary about the dangerous sea life around the Great Barrier Reef. On September 4th, the crew couldn't film as intended, so he took the opportunity to shoot some family-friendly material with a stingray he found lounging in shallow water for his 8-year-old daughter's youth-oriented series, Bindi, the Jungle Girl. But when Irwin disturbed the animal, it reacted by stabbing him multiple times in the chest with its stinger. At least one of the stings hit Irwin's heart, and in the aftermath, he believed his lung had been pierced as well. The combination of the agonizingly painful venom and the physical trauma proved fatal.
The animals have lost the best friend they ever had. And so have I.
Toxinologist Jamie Seymour described the incident in an interview with WBUR, saying, "It was just a really bad accident. If he'd been 5 feet to one side or coming from another direction, or the sun had been somewhere else, it wouldn't have happened." The media was awash with tributes to Irwin and expressions of sympathy toward his family. Even in the US, Irwin dominated CNN's news cycle for an entire week. Speaking to The Guardian, Irwin's friend Russell Crowe said, "There are not many zookeepers who would command that sort of attention, and all that means is you got your message across."
Do you like echidnas?
Yeah. Can I pet it?
Sure.
The relatively mundane animal that killed the man who'd survived some of the most dangerous beasts on the planet prompted disbelief. Australian expats in other countries headed to Aussie-themed bars to reminisce, and people were seen with black armbands and Irwin-themed mementos ranging from wigs and fake crocodiles to replicas of his famed khaki uniform.
Khaki isn't just a colour. It's an attitude, mate!
While Irwin could be a divisive figure thanks to the occasional misstep and his embodiment of an old-school Australian stereotype, even some of his detractors had to admit that his conservation work had been admirable.
We've got to catch this croc, otherwise they'll shoot it dead and turn it into boots, bags and belts.
Terri Irwin wasn't quite as well known to the public as her global celebrity husband, but she worked right alongside him on documentaries and at Australia Zoo. The pair met in 1991 when she visited what was then called the Queensland Reptile and Fauna Park, and they bonded over their passion for animals.
My jaw was on the ground. I couldn't believe this guy, and I thought, I've got to meet him.
The couple, married a year later, created the Crocodile Hunter on a conservation trip that doubled as their honeymoon and went on to put all the money from the many series they created into turning the zoo into a top-class conservation facility.
You can pet him, mate. He's just...
I bet I could.
After Irwin's death, Terri continued working at Australia Zoo, but she isn't looking for new love. In a 2024 interview with Us Weekly, she said, "I totally got my happily ever after. And while there are a lot of wonderful men in the world, can you see another Steve Irwin? I just can't. I had the best marriage in the whole world for 14 years, and I'm very comfortable with the person I see in the mirror."
My home, Australia Zoo, is our gift to the entire world.
Irwin's home base was Australia Zoo, a vast wildlife park on Queensland's Sunshine Coast. His mother established it in 1970 as Beerwah Reptile Park, and Irwin's family later expanded it into a 700-acre conservation and education park with its own wildlife hospital and a staff of more than 500 people.
Mate, every single thing you see here today, myself and my mum and dad built from the ground up.
But after Irwin's death, the facility became a place of pilgrimage for fans mourning the loss of a national icon. So many people flocked to the area to leave flowers and pay their respects that it caused traffic problems, and the police had to temporarily lower the speed limits to minimise risk. Australia Zoo was likely the most important place in the world for Irwin. Terri announced a televised public vigil to be held at the zoo's Crocoseum area, deciding it was the only location Irwin would have approved.
I don't want Daddy's passion to ever end. I want to help endangered wildlife just like he did.
The event was ultimately watched by some 300 million people worldwide. Australia Zoo is also Irwin's final resting place. Irwin was a notorious animal lover, so he would likely hate the fact that his death managed to utterly destroy a largely peaceful sea creature's reputation. Even the crew members who were present on the day of his death have pointed out that stingrays are generally docile creatures and that Irwin's death was a massively unfortunate incident.
Stingrays are normally very calm. If they don't want you to be around them, they'll swim away. They're very fast swimmers.
Nevertheless, the fact that a stingray, out of all the dangerous things he wrestled with over the course of his career, managed to kill Irwin has done a world of harm to the animal's rep. Stingrays, on the whole, are far from aggressive. In fact, including Irwin, Australia has only seen 5 stingray deaths since 1945. In the entire world, the fatality rate during the same time period is just 20. For perspective, cows kill the same number of people every year in the US alone. Tragically, however, it seems that fans who misunderstand everything Irwin was about started hunting stingrays to avenge him. In the days after his death, several dead stingrays turned up on Australia's beaches, some with their stingers cut off. Irwin's colleagues weren't amused. Michael Hornby of Irwin's Wildlife Warriors Worldwide told the Sydney Morning Herald, "We just want to make it very clear that we will not accept and not stand for anyone who's taken a form of retribution. That's the last thing Steve would want." The year of Irwin's death, 2006, was also a bad year for the environment. In July, the war between Israel and Hezbollah caused a massive oil spill into the Mediterranean after Israel bombed a Lebanese power plant, contaminating many miles of shoreline and posing a threat to marine life. In August, a Trafigura-leased ship illegally dumped waste oil and caustic soda in Côte d'Ivoire. The mixture produced hydrogen sulfide, which sent more than 100,000 to the hospital and killed at least 15. The same month, a sinking tanker created the worst oil spill the Philippines had ever seen, contaminating a marine reserve among other areas. Irwin was enraged by such incidents, especially the ones caused by war and corruption.
Yeah, people factor does actually scare the living daylights out of me, and I've seen some pretty awful, icky sort of things going on.
In a 2001 interview with Scientific American, he expressed his views on environmental destruction in poor, vulnerable areas. Using the 1999 East Timor crisis as an example, Irwin asked, "How are we going to stop it when the majority of people are below the poverty line and many have got disease? The people are killing each other down in East Timor. Wherever you've got this in-house fighting, crikey, habitats all of a sudden, yeah, who gives a rip?" When Irwin died, the world was dealing with the aftermath of the 2006 Lebanon War, which had begun on July 12th when Hezbollah attacked Israel, killing 8 Israeli soldiers and taking 2 hostages. In response, Israel bombed numerous Hezbollah targets, destroying a considerable amount of infrastructure in southern Lebanon and Beirut. On August 14th, the United Nations got both sides to agree to a ceasefire that effectively ended the war in a draw. However, tensions remained high, and Israel's aerial and naval blockades of Lebanon were still in effect when Irwin died. While Irwin's stingray-related death was a strange and tragic incident, the year 2006 also brought another completely unexpected loss that didn't involve fatalities, but still proved highly controversial. On August 24th, the International Astronomy Union voted to strip Pluto of its planet status, thus effectively removing the 9th planet of our solar system. This was a jarring turn of events, considering that the IAU meeting in question originally intended to determine whether the recently discovered Eris had what it takes to become the 10th planet orbiting our Sun. Instead, it discovered that neither Pluto nor Eris fit the Union's newly formed definition of a planet, so the organisation chose to reclassify both as dwarf planets. Pluto lost its planetary status because, while it hit the brief when it came to being a spherical object that orbits the Sun, it was too small to clear nearby areas of other objects.
I'm quite familiar with Dr. Tyson. He's responsible for the demotion of Pluto from planetary status. I liked Pluto.
Many people disliked the idea of the IAU demoting Pluto. Its new rank as a dwarf planet sparked a massive backlash from experts and the general public alike, and a petition to fight the Union's new definition of a planet got over 200 signatures from scientists.
The dream of actually getting to Pluto began with a 6-year-old boy in love with science.
Alan Stern of the Southwest Research Institute and NASA's New Horizons Pluto mission told Nature, "I am just disgusted by the way the IAU, which is meant to represent the best in science, handled this matter. Still, regardless of the critics, Pluto's dwarf planet status has endured." Nuclear weapons were frequently in the news in 2006 thanks to the Iran nuclear standoff. The situation started in 2002 when news of a large Iranian nuclear enrichment plant emerged and the US publicly suspected that the country intended to manufacture nuclear weapons. The European Union was able to de-escalate the situation at first, but Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's rise to power in Iran's 2005 presidential election soon inflamed tension. After Iran resumed its temporarily paused uranium enrichment program under Ahmadinejad, 2006 became a year of difficult diplomatic negotiations that ultimately led to nuclear technology sanctions on Iran in December. In the end, this accomplished very little, and tensions over Iran's nuclear program have since continued in one way or another. And the Iran standoff wasn't the only difficult nuclear-themed situation around the time of Irwin's death. North Korea's nuclear program was also making waves, and in October 2006, the mysterious isolated country announced its first ever nuclear weapons test. This was condemned by everyone from the United Nations to North Korea's usual ally, China. On August 22, 2006, Pulkovo Airlines Flight 612 crashed, killing all 170 people on board and destroying the Tupolev Tu-154 plane. The plane took off from Anapa and was on its way to St. Petersburg when tragedy struck. The plane came down in Ukraine, near Russia's border. Both countries' first responders collaborated to handle the situation, and President Vladimir Putin quickly declared August 24th a day of national mourning. Initially, the details of the flight's final moments were hazy. At first, Ukraine stated that the pilot had reported a fire on board shortly before the crash, which would indicate that an emergency landing had gone terribly wrong. Meanwhile, Russia blamed difficult weather conditions and a possible lightning strike. At the time of Irwin's death, the investigation of the accident was ongoing. The MAC Interstate Aviation Committee report, which was released 6 months after the incident, concluded that the pilot had tried and failed to climb above a thunderstorm. This created massive turbulence, which, together with the plane crew's mistakes and improper training, caused the plane to lose airspeed and spin into the ground. The wheels of time don't stop for one tragedy, even when that tragedy is as globally impactful as Irwin's death. And there was no shortage of events of import going on in the world on September 4th, 2006. It was Labor Day. 1,000 first responders and other workers who'd been at Ground Zero during months of recovery after 9/11s joined a class action negligence suit against the city of New York, claiming that they'd been exposed to toxic elements on site.
There was, probably close to 1 million light bulbs in those two buildings. How many computer screens?
Britain was mourning a military plane accident that killed 12 soldiers, the country's single worst military loss since the 1982 war in the Falklands. All of these things and many others made the news on September 4th, 2006. Still, a prominent celebrity's death has a tendency to overwrite the other events of the day in the minds of people and often in the media. In Irwin's case, this is arguably understandable.
I laugh at myself, because I think I'm a bit of a knucklehead.
Is that you?
Is that me? It is me, yeah.
After all, he was a true rarity, a global icon whose mission was the preservation of our planet and its creatures, and whose death was so unexpected and dramatic that it came as an utter shock.